Welcome to Hello Stories. Today we'll explore one of the most powerful and thought-provoking novels in world literature, Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky. This story takes us deep into the human mind. It's more than just a crime story. It's a journey of the soul. Now, take a breath, find a quiet space, and let's begin the journey.
Crime and Punishment, Part 1. It was a hot evening in early July. The sun was still bright, but the air was heavy and hard to breathe. In the city of St. Petersburg, a young man named Rodion Raskolnikov left his small room and walked slowly into the streets. His room was tiny, almost like a closet, and sat at the top of an old building. It felt like a prison. He hadn't paid rent in months and barely had anything to eat. He wore old clothes that didn't fit well. His coat was torn at the sleeve, and his shoes were worn out. But more than hunger or poverty, there was something else troubling him, something in his mind. He walked as if lost in thought, as if carrying a great weight. For weeks, Raskolnikov had been thinking about something, a theory, a plan. He believed that some people, the extraordinary ones, had the right to do terrible things if it helped the world. Napoleon had done it. Why couldn't he? That idea filled his mind day and night, eating away at his soul. He passed through dirty alleyways and crowded streets. The city was loud, full of noise and motion, but he didn't notice. His thoughts were dark and heavy. He was walking toward a woman, a pawnbroker named Alyona Ivanovna. She was old, greedy, and cruel. Many people feared and hated her. He had visited her before, pawning his father's watch or his sister's jewelry. She always gave little money and insulted him with her eyes. But this time was different. He wasn't going for money. He was going to test something, his courage, his will. When he reached the building, his heart pounded. He stopped and looked around. No one seemed to notice him. He climbed the dark staircase slowly. The smell of old wood and dust filled the air. He reached the door and knocked. The old woman answered. Her eyes were sharp and suspicious. He showed her a silver cigarette case. She took it, looked at it closely, then gave him just a few rubles. She didn't trust anyone. As she talked, Raskolnikov's eyes moved around the room, the furniture, the keys on her belt, the heavy door. He wasn't really listening. He was studying. When he left, his body felt weak. The heat outside pressed on him like a wall. His thoughts raced, his head spun. Could he really do what he had planned? He didn't know yet, but something inside told him that the moment was coming soon. Back in his tiny room, Raskolnikov lay on the old sofa. He hadn't eaten since morning, and the room was hot and airless. The air smelled of dust, poverty, and despair. He stared at the ceiling. His hands were shaking. He didn't know if it was from hunger or fear, or something deeper. He kept whispering to himself, "Is it time? Can I really do this?" He got up, paced the room, then sat down again. His mind was a storm. The same thoughts came and went, again and again. He remembered lectures at university, discussions about morality and power. Some men, he thought, were above the law. If a great leader killed for a higher cause, wasn't that forgivable? Wasn't that justified? But this wasn't a theory anymore. It was real. It was a plan. And the plan had a face, Alyona Ivanovna, the old pawnbroker. A useless, cruel woman who made the lives of poor people even harder. She is nothing, he whispered. If I kill her, I could use her money for good. I could save others. I could change my life. As evening fell, the sounds of the city drifted through the window, children laughing, dogs barking, carts rolling past. But inside the room, there was only silence and heat. Raskolnikov sat by the window and stared out, lost in thought. Suddenly, he remembered something important. The old woman had a younger sister named Lizaveta. She was simple-minded and kind, very different from Alyona. Raskolnikov had once seen her at the market. She was tall, quiet, always working. He felt a flicker of guilt. What if she's there? He thought. What if she sees me? He tried to shake off the doubt. He stood up, opened a cupboard, and looked inside. There was an old axe under some clothes. His hands trembled as he touched it. Not yet, he whispered. Soon. He hid it again and shut the door. Hours passed. He didn't eat dinner. He barely moved. When night came, he finally lay down and closed his eyes, but sleep would not come. His mind was racing with images, of blood, of money, of escape. The plan was no longer just an idea. It had become part of him. Outside, the city fell asleep. But inside that small, hot room, a young man lay wide awake, on the edge of a crime that would change his life forever. The next morning, Raskolnikov woke up late. His head hurt, and his mouth was dry. He hadn't slept well. The sun was already high in the sky, shining through his dirty window. For a few minutes, he didn't remember anything. But slowly the thoughts came back. The plan. The axe. The old woman. He sat up and looked around the room. Everything felt strange, like he didn't belong there. He felt cold sweat on his back. Maybe it's a bad dream, he whispered. But it wasn't. The thoughts were too clear. The feelings too strong. He tried to distract himself. He walked to the sink and splashed water on his face. Then he opened the window and looked down. The street was busy. People were walking, talking, working. Life was going on, but Raskolnikov felt like a ghost, standing between two worlds. He needed to go outside. Maybe the fresh air would help. He dressed quickly and left the building. The streets of St. Petersburg were hot and dusty. Horses pulled carts through the narrow roads. Children played near the market. But Raskolnikov didn't see any of it. His mind was still trapped. He wandered aimlessly for hours. Sometimes he turned one way, then suddenly changed direction. He didn't know where he was going. His feet just moved on their own. He passed a church, then a bridge, then a police station. And then, he stopped. The police station. His heart began to race. His legs felt weak. Something deep inside him screamed, "Leave now." But he didn't move. Slowly, he walked up the steps and entered. Inside, the air smelled of paper and sweat. Officers sat behind desks, writing or talking. A clerk looked up and asked what he wanted. Raskolnikov opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His vision blurred. The floor felt like it was moving. Then everything went dark. When he woke up, he was lying on a bench. Someone had brought him water. The clerk looked worried and said, "You fainted. Do you need a doctor?" Raskolnikov shook his head. "No, I'm fine. Just tired." He stood up quickly, mumbled thanks, and left the building. Outside, the air hit him like a wave. He stood still, breathing hard. He didn't know why he had gone to the police station. Maybe part of him wanted to confess. Maybe part of him already felt guilty, even before the crime. The next day, Raskolnikov stayed in his room. He felt weak and tired. His body hurt, and his mind was full of confusion. He couldn't focus. Everything around him felt strange, like he was in a dream. He didn't eat. He didn't wash. He just lay on the sofa and stared at the wall. Sometimes he slept, sometimes he woke, but he couldn't tell how much time had passed. Someone knocked at the door. At first, he didn't answer. The knocking came again. Finally, he stood up and opened it. It was Nastasia, the servant from downstairs. She looked at him with concern. "You haven't eaten in 2 days," she said. "Are you sick?" "I'm fine," Raskolnikov whispered. "Just tired." She brought him some soup. He tried to eat but couldn't finish it. Raskolnikov whispered, "Just tired." She shook her head. "You need to take care of yourself. You look like a dead man." Later, he received a letter. It was from his mother. He read it slowly. She wrote about his sister, Dunya. She had found a job working as a governess, but the employer tried to ruin her name. Now, she was engaged to a man named Luzin, a lawyer. His mother hoped this marriage would help Raskolnikov. Raskolnikov felt a storm in his heart. He was angry and ashamed. His mother and sister were sacrificing themselves for him, and he was lying in bed, doing nothing. He hated Luzin already, without even meeting him. "He wants to buy my sister," Raskolnikov muttered. "To control her, so he can control me." He walked in circles, holding the letter, talking to himself. "I must stop this. I can't let them suffer because of me. I have to do something." His face turned pale, but his eyes burned. Something inside him was waking up again. Raskolnikov left his room and walked toward the city center. His head was still full of thoughts, but his body moved on its own. He didn't have a clear plan. He just needed to get out, to breathe, to move. The streets were crowded. People were busy shopping, arguing, rushing. Raskolnikov looked around but felt no connection to anyone. The city felt noisy, dirty, and cruel. His heart beat heavily as he walked without a destination. He stopped by a tavern. Normally, he avoided such places. But today, something pulled him inside. Maybe he wanted to forget. Maybe he hoped to find some peace in the noise. Inside, the air was thick with smoke and beer. Men sat at tables, drinking, laughing, shouting. Raskolnikov ordered a glass of vodka and sat alone in a corner. The drink burned his throat, but it cleared his mind a little. A man sat down near him. He was old, with gray hair and sad eyes. He looked tired and poor, like life had worn him down. He introduced himself as Marmeladov, a former government worker. Raskolnikov nodded politely. Marmeladov started talking. He spoke fast and with emotion. He told Raskolnikov about his life, how he lost his job, became a drunk, and ruined his family. He had a wife and a daughter named Sonia. "Sonia is only a girl," he said, his voice trembling. "But she sells herself on the street. She does it to feed us. I hate it. I cry every time. But I let it happen. I drink. I do nothing." Tears rolled down his cheeks. Other people in the tavern laughed at him, but he didn't care. "God sees everything," he said. "God will forgive even me." Raskolnikov listened silently. There was something about this broken man that touched him. That night, Raskolnikov walked home slowly. The streets were quiet, and the sky was dark. His thoughts were heavy. He couldn't stop thinking about Marmeladov's story. About Sonia. About poverty. About suffering. He asked himself, why do some people suffer so much? Why are others so rich and cruel? He felt anger burning inside. The world seemed unfair. People like Sonia gave everything, while others lived in luxury without care. Raskolnikov reached his room. It was dark and stuffy. He lay on his bed, but he could not sleep. Thoughts rushed through his mind like a storm. Again and again, he thought about the old pawnbroker woman, Alyona Ivanovna. He hated her. She was greedy and cruel. She made money from the poor and gave nothing back. She is useless, he thought. She lives while good people starve. Then a dangerous idea returned to his mind, an idea he had tried to forget. What if he removed her? What if he used her money for good? He could help others. He could change lives. One death to save many. Was that so wrong? His heart beat faster. He sat up and walked across the room. No, he whispered. I'm just sick. I need rest. But the thought stayed with him. It waited in the dark, quiet and patient, like a shadow. He took out his old clothes, the ones he wore when he visited the pawnbroker. He looked at them carefully. Then he hid a small axe under his coat. He didn't think. He just moved. As if his body was following a plan without asking his mind. Outside, the night was silent. The city slept. Raskolnikov walked quickly, not looking around. His face was pale. His hands trembled. But still, he walked. Toward the old woman's home. Toward his fate. Raskolnikov climbed the stairs to the old woman's apartment. Each step felt heavy. The axe was still hidden under his coat. His heart beat so loudly, he thought someone might hear it. But the building was quiet. He stopped in front of her door. His hands were shaking. He rang the bell. After a moment, Alyona Ivanovna opened the door slightly and peeked out. She recognized him from before. You again, she said. What do you want now? I brought something else to pawn, Raskolnikov replied, trying to sound calm. She opened the door and let him in. He stepped inside slowly. The room was small and dark. She walked ahead of him, not looking back. She was unlocking her cabinet to check the item. In that moment, Raskolnikov pulled the axe from his coat. He raised it. His hands shook. Then, he brought it down on her head. The blow was hard. She fell at once. There was blood. She made a soft sound, almost like a sigh. He struck her again, and she stopped moving. The room was silent again. Raskolnikov stood still, frozen. He could hardly breathe. His hands were red. His mind felt empty. But he forced himself to move. He looked around quickly, searching for money and valuables. He found a small box with jewelry. He stuffed it in his pocket. Then he opened drawers, checking for anything valuable. But he worked slowly. His hands didn't move right. His ears were ringing. Suddenly, he heard a noise. Footsteps in the hallway. Someone was coming. His heart stopped. He grabbed the axe and ran to the door. It opened, and there stood Lizaveta, the old woman's half-sister. She saw the blood. She saw the axe. Her mouth opened, but she didn't scream. She just froze in fear. Raskolnikov didn't think. He raised the axe again, and struck. She fell too. Now the silence felt unbearable. 2 bodies. 2 deaths. Raskolnikov stood in a room full of blood and stillness. His hands trembled. His breath came fast. He felt like the walls were closing in. Part 2. For 2 days, Raskolnikov stayed in his room. He was sick with fever. His landlady sent Nastasia, the servant, to check on him. He didn't eat. He didn't talk. He didn't know if it was day or night. He had strange dreams. In one, the old woman stood beside his bed. She didn't move, didn't speak. Just stared at him. In another, he walked through the city, but no one could see him. He was invisible. On the 3rd day, he finally opened his eyes and sat up. His clothes were wet with sweat. He looked around his messy room and felt lost. What have I done? He whispered. But the words gave him no answer. Nastasia brought him some soup. Eat, she said gently. You've been out for days. Raskolnikov took the bowl. His hands were weak. He sipped slowly. Has anyone come? He asked. A few people, she said. But I told them you were ill. Raskolnikov lay back down. A strange calm came over him. Maybe it wasn't real, he thought. Maybe it was a dream. But deep down, he knew the truth. He remembered everything. Every step. Every sound. Every drop of blood. Later that day, a visitor came, Razumikin, Raskolnikov's close friend. He was cheerful, loud, and full of energy, the opposite of Raskolnikov. "You look terrible," he said. "What's wrong with you?" Raskolnikov forced a smile. "Just sick. That's all." Razumikin sat down beside him. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you. I brought some medicine and bread." He spoke with kindness, not knowing the storm inside his friend's mind. The next morning, Raskolnikov felt a little stronger. He got out of bed and walked slowly around the room. His body was weak, but his mind was active. He couldn't stop thinking about the murder. "It happened," he told himself. "I killed her. I killed Lizaveta too." But even as he said the words, they felt unreal, like part of someone else's life. Suddenly, he felt a wave of fear. What if the police were watching him? What if someone had seen him that night? He rushed to the door and listened in the hallway. Nothing. Silence. He sat down, breathing hard. "I must stay calm," he whispered. "No one knows. There's no proof." Still, doubt crept into his heart like a slow, cold wind. A knock at the door made him jump. It was Razumikin again. This time, he brought a visitor, Zosimov, a young doctor. The doctor checked Raskolnikov's pulse and looked into his eyes. "You're recovering," Zosimov said. "But you need food, rest, and fresh air. And stop thinking so much." Raskolnikov gave a weak smile. "That's hard." Razumikin tried to cheer him up. He talked about books, old university friends, and funny stories. Raskolnikov listened, but his thoughts were far away. He couldn't laugh. His guilt was too deep. As they talked, a strange thing happened. Raskolnikov suddenly laughed, not at the joke, but at something inside himself. He felt like he was wearing a mask, and everyone else was blind. "They don't know," he thought. "They're sitting here, drinking tea, and I'm a murderer. But they smile. They talk like nothing has happened." When Razumikin and Zosimov left, Raskolnikov lay back down. His head ached. His heart felt tired. "How long can I pretend?" he whispered. "How long before the truth comes out?" Raskolnikov woke up late the next morning. The sunlight hurt his eyes. He sat on the edge of the bed, confused. For a few moments, he forgot everything: the crime, the fear, the shame. Then it all came back to him. The murder. The blood. Lizaveta's shocked face. He closed his eyes, but he couldn't escape the memories. They were part of him now. He tried to distract himself. He washed his face, changed his shirt, and stepped outside for a walk. The city was noisy and full of life. People talked, laughed, carried baskets of food. But Raskolnikov felt out of place, like a shadow walking among the living. He saw a policeman nearby and quickly turned down a side street. Even seeing a uniform made his heart race. He walked for hours with no direction. At one point, he found himself standing in front of the police station. His feet had brought him there without thinking. He turned around quickly and left. Back at his room, he found Razumikin waiting. His friend smiled and said, "You need fresh air? Or were you running from something?" Raskolnikov forced a laugh. "Just walking." Razumikin looked closely at him. "You're pale again. Maybe I should stay the night here. Just in case." Raskolnikov didn't argue. He was too tired to pretend. The two friends sat in silence for a while. Then Razumikin said, "By the way, there's talk about the murder. The pawnbroker and her sister. People are scared. The police are investigating." Raskolnikov stiffened. "Any suspects?" Not really, said Razumikin. They say it was someone poor. Someone who hated the old woman. But there's no real lead. That night, Raskolnikov had strange dreams again. He dreamed of blood on his hands, people pointing at him, and voices saying, "We know." He woke up in the dark, sweating. His guilt was alive inside him. The next day, Razumikin invited Raskolnikov to come with him to a publishing office. A man named Porfiry Petrovich worked there. He was a police investigator, and also their old university friend. Porfiry welcomed them with a warm smile. He was short, round, and clever-looking. His eyes were sharp, and he watched people closely, like he could see inside their minds. "Raskolnikov," he said, "it's been a long time. I hear you've been unwell." Raskolnikov nodded and forced a smile. "Getting better, slowly." They talked about books and law for a while. Then Porfiry changed the subject. "By the way," he said, "didn't you once pawn something to the old woman who was murdered?" Raskolnikov's heart skipped a beat. But he stayed calm. "Yes," he said. "A silver ring." "Why?" "Oh, just asking," said Porfiry with a smile. "We're talking to everyone who knew her." Porfiry didn't push. He asked a few more questions, but they seemed casual. Still, Raskolnikov felt watched, like every word he said was being measured. "You must think carefully," said Porfiry at one point. "The mind can play tricks after such events. People act strangely when frightened." Raskolnikov looked at him sharply. Was that a message? A warning? When they left, Raskolnikov felt exhausted. "He knows," he whispered to himself. "Or he suspects. He's playing with me." Razumikin, however, didn't notice anything strange. "Porfiry's clever, but harmless," he said. "You're just tired." But Raskolnikov wasn't sure. He felt like a mouse in a trap, and Porfiry was the cat. After leaving Porfiry's office, Raskolnikov walked in silence. His thoughts were loud, but his face was quiet. Razumikin walked beside him, talking cheerfully, but Raskolnikov didn't really listen. His heart beat fast. Every word Porfiry had said ran through his mind again. Did Porfiry know something? Or was he just testing him? Was this a game? They reached Raskolnikov's room. Razumikin helped him lie down. "Try to rest," he said. "You're still weak." But Raskolnikov didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, lost in thought. A little while later, someone knocked on the door. It was Nastasia, the servant. "Your mother and sister are here," she said. Raskolnikov sat up suddenly. What? He hadn't expected them so soon. He wasn't ready. His clothes were dirty. His mind was full of fear and guilt. How could he face them? But there they were, his mother Pulcheria Alexandrovna, and his sister Dunya. His mother had tears in her eyes. Dunya looked calm and strong. "Rodion," his mother cried. "You look so pale, so thin." He hugged her, but something felt strange. He felt distant, like he was no longer the same son. Dunya sat beside him and held his hand. "We're here now. We'll take care of you." Raskolnikov said nothing. He looked down, ashamed. They talked for a while, telling him about their journey and their small hotel room. But Raskolnikov barely listened. He kept thinking, they don't know. They're smiling. And I'm a murderer. Suddenly, he stood up. "I need air," he said. "Rodion, wait," his mother called. But he had already walked out into the street, leaving their voices behind. He walked fast, not knowing where he was going. His thoughts were wild. "I can't do this. I can't pretend. But I can't confess either. What's left for me?" Raskolnikov walked for hours through the streets. He passed shops, churches and crowds, but he saw none of it. His mind was far away, locked in its own prison. He thought of his mother and sister, their faces full of love and hope. And he thought of the old woman and her sister, full of fear and blood. The contrast tore at his soul. Suddenly, he realized he was near the river. He leaned over the edge and stared into the water. The current moved slowly. What if I just disappeared? He thought. But he didn't jump. Something deep inside him, maybe pride, maybe fear, held him back. He turned away from the river and walked on. Later, he found himself near a bridge. There, he saw a young woman sitting on a bench, crying. Her clothes were poor, and her eyes empty. A man stood nearby, watching her. Raskolnikov guessed what was happening. The girl was drunk, vulnerable. The man was waiting for a chance to take advantage of her. Suddenly filled with rage, Raskolnikov shouted at the man, "Leave her alone." The man cursed and walked away. Raskolnikov sat beside the girl, trying to wake her. A police officer walked by and asked what was going on. Raskolnikov explained. The officer looked at him strangely, but nodded and walked on. Moments later, Raskolnikov left the girl sleeping on the bench and walked away. He felt angry, not just at the man, but at the whole world. At the cruelty, the filth, the injustice. He walked back home slowly. When he arrived, Razumikin was there, waiting nervously. "Where have you been?" he asked. "Your mother and Dunya are worried sick." Raskolnikov didn't answer. He collapsed on the bed, exhausted. His head ached. The weight of everything, the murder, the lies, the guilt, pressed down on him like a mountain. He whispered, "It's all too much." Then closed his eyes. Sleep finally came, dark, dreamless, heavy. When Raskolnikov woke up, the room was quiet. The air was heavy. He sat up slowly and saw his mother and Dunya sitting nearby. They had been waiting. "Rodion dear," his mother said softly, "you scared us. You looked so sick earlier." Raskolnikov nodded slowly. "I'm sorry." Dunya took his hand. "You don't have to hide from us. We're your family." But Raskolnikov pulled his hand away. "No, you don't understand." His mother looked worried. "Then help us understand. Tell us what's wrong." But he shook his head. "Not now." There was a long silence. Then Razumikin walked in with a tray of tea and bread. He tried to lighten the mood with jokes and stories, and little by little, the tension faded. They sat together and talked for a while. Razumikin spoke kindly, and Raskolnikov listened quietly. Dunya smiled. Even Raskolnikov's mother looked a little happier. Razumikin offered to help them find a new place to stay. "You can't stay at that old hotel," he said. "I know a landlady nearby, clean, safe, and quiet." They agreed. Raskolnikov didn't say much, but he didn't object either. A strange peace settled in the room, fragile but real. As the sun set, Raskolnikov stood by the window. He watched the sky turn red. His face was calm, but inside, the storm still raged. He whispered to himself, "They love me, and I'm lying to them." But he said nothing more. Part 3. The next morning, Razumikin came early to Raskolnikov's room. He brought good news. He had found a nice apartment for Raskolnikov's mother and sister. It was close by and affordable. "They can move in today," Razumikin said excitedly. "I've already spoken to the landlady. Everything's ready." Raskolnikov nodded weakly. "Thank you." Razumikin noticed how pale and tired Raskolnikov looked. "You still don't look well," he said. "You should eat something." But Raskolnikov shook his head. Later, They helped his mother and Dunya move into the new place. It was small, but clean and quiet. Pulcheria Alexandrovna smiled for the first time in days. Razumikin was especially kind to Dunya. He carried bags, opened doors, and made her laugh. Raskolnikov noticed this, and it made him uneasy. That afternoon, the three of them, Raskolnikov, Razumikin, and Dunya, sat down to talk. The conversation turned serious. It was about Dunya's fiancé, Pyotr Petrovich Luzin. Raskolnikov didn't like Luzin. He thought Luzin was arrogant and controlling. "You're marrying him out of duty, not love," he said. "That's wrong." Dunya looked calm, but her voice was firm. "I'm doing this for our family. Luzin has money and connections. He can help us." But Raskolnikov wouldn't accept that. "Don't sell yourself for our sake," he said coldly. "I won't allow it." Dunya stood up angry. "It's my choice." The air was tense. Razumikin stepped in, trying to calm them. "Let's not fight," he said gently. "We've just reunited. Let's be glad we're together again." After a while, Dunya left to unpack. Raskolnikov stayed behind with Razumikin. He looked tired and defeated. "She's too good for him," he muttered. "She deserves better." Raskolnikov woke up late the next morning. He felt tired, but his mind was clearer than before. He remembered that Razumikin had promised to bring his mother and sister to visit him. The thought made him nervous. He didn't feel ready to face them. He felt ashamed. He had avoided them for too long. Soon, there was a knock at the door. Razumikin entered first, smiling. Behind him were Pulcheria Alexandrovna and Dunya. Raskolnikov stood up slowly. His mother rushed to hug him, tears in her eyes. Dunya looked at him quietly, full of concern. He tried to smile and said, "I'm all right. Just tired." But his face was pale, and his hands shook. Razumikin spoke cheerfully, trying to lighten the mood. He praised Dunya's strength and kindness, and joked to make Raskolnikov smile. They talked about St. Petersburg, their apartment, and Luzin. Razumikin made it clear that he didn't trust Luzin. Raskolnikov stayed quiet most of the time. He looked at his mother and sister with guilt. He loved them, but he felt like he didn't deserve them. Dunya held his hand and said softly, "We are here now. And we're staying." Raskolnikov felt warmth in his chest, but also pain. He didn't know how long he could keep his secret hidden. Later that day, Raskolnikov was alone at home. He lay on the bed, his head full of thoughts. He kept thinking about the old pawnbroker and her sister. The memory wouldn't leave him alone. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. It was a police officer. His name was Porfiry Petrovich. Porfiry smiled politely. "I just wanted to talk with you a little. Nothing official." Raskolnikov felt a chill inside, but he nodded. "Come in." They sat down. Porfiry began asking casual questions about Raskolnikov's studies, his recent illness, and his friends. But slowly, the questions changed. Porfiry asked about the old pawnbroker. He asked if Raskolnikov ever visited her. Raskolnikov tried to stay calm. He answered quickly and with short replies. But his heart was beating fast. Porfiry smiled gently. "It's just a routine check. We're talking to many people." Then, Porfiry leaned forward. "Hypothetically," he said, "if someone committed a crime, would they feel guilty?" Raskolnikov's face turned pale. He looked away and said nothing. Porfiry stood up and smiled. "Thank you for your time. We'll talk again soon." Then he left. After the door closed, Raskolnikov sat still for a long time. He felt like Porfiry knew something. and it terrified him. After Porfiry left, Raskolnikov could not sit still. He walked around the room nervously. "He knows," Raskolnikov whispered to himself. "He's just playing with me." He felt trapped, like a mouse in a cage. Every word Porfiry said replayed in his head. Just then, Razumikin arrived. He noticed something was wrong. "You look awful. What happened?" he asked. Raskolnikov hesitated. He didn't want to share everything, but he mentioned Porfiry's visit. Razumikin became serious. "Porfiry? Why is he questioning you?" Raskolnikov shrugged. "Just routine," he said. "Nothing important." But his voice wasn't convincing. Razumikin frowned. He didn't like this. He felt that Raskolnikov was hiding something. Later that evening, Raskolnikov decided to leave his room. He walked the streets alone. The cold air helped clear his mind, but guilt followed him like a shadow. He passed by a church, then a tavern, then the river. Each place reminded him of something, or someone. Deep inside, he wanted to confess. But another voice told him to stay silent, to survive. The battle inside him was growing stronger every day. The next morning, Raskolnikov sat quietly in his room. He hadn't slept much. His mind was full of fear and confusion. Suddenly, he heard footsteps in the hallway. A moment later, Porfiry Petrovitch entered the room again. Porfiry was smiling as usual, polite and calm. "I hope I'm not bothering you," he said cheerfully. Raskolnikov tried to look relaxed. "Of course not. Please sit." Porfiry looked around the room slowly, as if he was searching for something. But he said nothing. Then he began to speak, not about the case, but about philosophy, crime, and guilt. "Some people," Porfiry said, "believe that certain individuals have the right to commit crimes, if it's for a greater purpose." Raskolnikov's heart skipped a beat. Those were the ideas from his own article, the one he had published as a student. "What do you think about that theory?" Porfiry asked, watching him closely. Raskolnikov felt trapped. He gave a short answer. "It's just theory. Ideas, not actions." Porfiry nodded slowly. "Of course. But ideas are dangerous, don't you think?" The room felt heavy with silence. Raskolnikov stared at the floor. He couldn't read Porfiry's expression anymore. Then Porfiry stood up. "I enjoyed our conversation. We'll speak again soon." He smiled and left. As the door closed, Raskolnikov felt a wave of panic. Porfiry wasn't just guessing. He was testing. And the trap was getting tighter. After Porfiry's visit, Raskolnikov felt worse than ever. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sleep. The fear inside him was growing. He walked through the city streets like a ghost. Faces blurred past him. He couldn't think clearly. He stopped by Sonia's small apartment. He needed someone to talk to, someone who would understand. Sonia welcomed him gently. She looked tired, but kind. Raskolnikov sat down and didn't speak for a long time. Finally he said, "Sonia, what would you do if someone you loved had done something terrible?" Sonia looked at him carefully. "I would still love them," she said softly. "And I would suffer with them." Raskolnikov lowered his head. He felt a tear form in his eye. He hadn't cried in a long time. They sat in silence. Sonia didn't ask questions. She just waited, with quiet patience. Finally, Raskolnikov stood up. "Thank you," he said. "I'll come back." And then he left. Outside, the sky was grey. Snowflakes began to fall. Raskolnikov looked up and whispered, "Maybe there's still time. Raskolnikov returned to Sonia's apartment late at night. Her small room was quiet and warm. She looked at him with wide, waiting eyes. He stood by the door, silent. "I came back," he said quietly. Sonia nodded. She didn't smile, she just listened. She knew something important was coming. Raskolnikov walked slowly to the table. "I want to tell you something," he said. "Something terrible." His hands were shaking. He couldn't look at her. But Sonia didn't move. She waited. "Do you remember the old pawnbroker, and her sister?" he asked. Sonia whispered, "Yes." Raskolnikov closed his eyes. I killed them," he said. "It was me." Sonia gasped softly, but she didn't pull away. Her eyes filled with tears. She took a step toward him. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you do it?" Raskolnikov couldn't answer. He dropped to his knees. "I thought I had the right," he said. "I thought I was above the law." Sonia knelt beside him and held his hands. Her tears fell on his fingers. "You must suffer," she said. "You must go and confess. Only then will you be free." Raskolnikov looked at her. "Will you come with me?" he asked. Sonia nodded. "Yes. I'll walk beside you, wherever you go." Outside, snow was falling again. But inside that room, something began to melt, a wall in Raskolnikov's heart. Part 4. The morning after his confession to Sonia, Raskolnikov felt weak and lost. He had not slept. His head hurt. But something inside him had changed. The weight on his chest felt a little lighter. He stayed in his room for hours, thinking. He knew Sonia wanted him to go to the police, to confess. But he wasn't ready. What will happen to me? He wondered. Prison? Work camps? Death? Just then Dunya, Raskolnikov's sister, came to visit. She looked serious and worried. "Rodion," she said, "there are rumors. People are talking about you. And Porfiry has been asking more questions." Raskolnikov looked down. "I know," he said. "It's too late to stop it now." Dunya grabbed his arm. "Please, tell me the truth. Did you do it?" He didn't answer. But his eyes did. Dunya's face went pale. Still, she held his hand tightly. "Whatever happens, you are still my brother. But you must be strong now." Raskolnikov nodded slowly. "Sonia wants me to go to the police. I'm thinking about it." Dunya stood up. "Then you should decide soon. Before Porfiry does." After she left, Raskolnikov sat in silence. His heart was heavy again, but now he was no longer alone. Raskolnikov walked slowly toward the police station. His mind was spinning. He wasn't going to confess, not yet. He just needed to see Porfiry. When he arrived, the office was quiet. Porfiry Petrovich sat behind a desk, writing something. He looked up and smiled. "Ah, Mr. Raskolnikov," he said warmly. "What brings you here today?" Raskolnikov sat down. "I wanted to speak with you," he said. "About the investigation." Porfiry leaned forward. "Of course. I've been hoping we'd talk again." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Porfiry said, "Let me ask you something. Why haven't you come to confess?" Raskolnikov's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" Porfiry smiled again. Calm, confident. Let's not pretend. I know it was you. I have no proof yet, but I feel it. Raskolnikov stood up quickly. You have no right to accuse me, he shouted. Porfiry didn't react. He simply shrugged. You'll confess soon. I believe you have a conscience. You're not like the others. Raskolnikov stared at him. He didn't know whether to feel fear, anger, or relief. Porfiry stood. You may leave for now. But remember, I'm waiting. Raskolnikov walked out into the street, his heart racing. The walls were closing in. Time was running out. After leaving the police station, Raskolnikov walked quickly through the streets. His heart was pounding. Porfiry knew. He was sure of it. But why had he let Raskolnikov go? Was it a game? Was he waiting for Raskolnikov to break down on his own? Raskolnikov couldn't stay calm. He needed to talk to someone. He didn't want to go home, not yet. He walked to Razumikin's building. His loyal friend greeted him warmly, but noticed how pale and nervous he looked. What's wrong? Razumikin asked. Are you sick again? Raskolnikov shook his head. I saw Porfiry. He knows something. I can feel it. Razumikin looked worried. Did he say anything? Nothing direct, said Raskolnikov. But he hinted. He's playing with me. They talked for a long time. Razumikin tried to comfort him. But Raskolnikov's mind was somewhere else. Just then, a servant arrived with a message. A man named Svidrigailov wants to speak with you, she said. Raskolnikov froze. Svidrigailov, his sister's former employer. A dangerous man with a dark past. What did he want? He told Razumikin, I have to go. I'll explain later. Then he left, walking into a new kind of danger. Raskolnikov arrived at the small, dark hotel where Svidrigailov was staying. He climbed the stairs slowly. His heart beat fast. What did this man want? Svidrigailov opened the door with a strange smile. Ah, Raskolnikov. I hoped you would come. The room smelled of perfume and tobacco. It felt rich, but also cold and strange. Svidrigailov offered him a seat and poured 2 glasses of wine. Let's talk like friends, he said. Raskolnikov didn't drink. Why did you send for me? He asked directly. Svidrigailov leaned back in his chair. Because I know something about you. And I think you can help me. Raskolnikov frowned. Help you? With what? Svidrigailov smiled again, slowly. I want to marry your sister, Dunya. Raskolnikov jumped from his chair. You're insane. She hates you. Maybe, said Svidrigailov calmly. But I'm rich now. I can give her everything. And I came to you first, out of respect. Raskolnikov clenched his fists. Stay away from her, he said coldly. If you go near her, I'll kill you. Svidrigailov laughed softly. So much anger, he said. But you should think carefully. We're not so different, you and I. Raskolnikov left without saying goodbye. His head was full of noise. What kind of man was Svidrigailov? And what was he planning? After leaving Svidrigailov, Raskolnikov walked for hours. The sky was grey. The streets were loud. But inside, he felt empty. Everything around him felt distant. Even the people, the buildings, the voices, they didn't feel real anymore. He walked past a church. He stopped and looked up at the cross. For a moment, he felt a strange pull, a desire to kneel and pray. But the moment passed. He turned away and kept walking. "Not yet," he whispered. Back at his apartment, Raskolnikov lay down on his bed. He felt sick, in body and soul. He had no strength, no will to eat, sleep, or speak. His thoughts chased each other endlessly: Sonia, Dunya, Porfiry, the old woman, blood, guilt, truth. Hours passed. Razumikin knocked on the door but got no answer. He left, worried. Later, someone else came, Sonia. She stepped in quietly and sat by his side. She said nothing, just stayed with him. Raskolnikov opened his eyes and saw her. His eyes filled with tears. "I'm so tired," he whispered. "I don't know what to do anymore." Sonia gently took his hand. "You must go through it," she said softly. "There's no other way." In that moment, her quiet presence gave him peace. For the first time in days, he closed his eyes and slept. Raskolnikov woke up the next morning feeling slightly calmer. The night had passed, and Sonia was gone. He washed his face, dressed, and tried to gather his thoughts. But as he turned toward the door, someone knocked. It was Porfiry Petrovitch. The police investigator stepped inside with a polite smile. "Good morning, Mr. Raskolnikov," he said. "Forgive me for coming uninvited. I hope you're feeling better." Raskolnikov stiffened. He didn't answer, only nodded. Porfiry sat down without waiting. "I just wanted to chat," Porfiry said. "No formal questions today." But Raskolnikov knew better. He could feel the trap being set. Porfiry talked about philosophy, crime, and guilt, all in a calm, friendly tone. But his eyes watched Raskolnikov closely. Finally, Porfiry leaned forward. What if someone committed a crime? Because he believed he had the right to. Would that person feel guilty? Raskolnikov's hands tightened. "I don't know," he said. "Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he'd feel proud." Porfiry smiled. "Interesting answer. I think such a man would suffer deeply, not from punishment but from his own soul." There was a long pause. Then Porfiry stood up. "Well, that's all I wanted. Just a conversation." He walked to the door, then turned back. "You know, Raskolnikov, the walls are closing in. Sooner or later, there will be no way out." Then he left. And Raskolnikov stood frozen, breathing hard, alone in the silence. The day passed slowly. Raskolnikov felt like a man walking through fog. Each step was heavy. Each thought led nowhere. He knew Porfiry was closing in. He knew his secrets couldn't stay hidden much longer. As night fell, he went to Sonia's apartment. She opened the door quietly and let him in. They sat in silence for a while. The room was poor and cold, but it felt warm with her presence. "Sonia," he finally said, "what if someone did something terrible, but thought it was right?" She looked at him with her soft eyes. "I think, even then, the heart knows. Deep down, we always know." Raskolnikov lowered his head. "I killed her, Sonia. The old woman. And her sister too. Sonia didn't move. She turned pale, but her eyes didn't leave his. Then, slowly, she reached out and took his hand. You must suffer, she said. But not alone. I will be with you. Always. Tears ran down Raskolnikov's face. He had never felt so seen, so forgiven. In her love, there was no judgment. Only hope. Will you come with me? He asked. When it's time, will you be there? Sonia nodded. Yes. To the end. In that moment, Raskolnikov knew, the road ahead would be hard, but he wouldn't walk it alone. Part 5. The next morning, Raskolnikov left Sonia's room early. The streets were quiet. He felt calm, but also numb. He walked without purpose. His feet moved, but his thoughts were still stuck on the night before. On her words. Her forgiveness. It felt unreal. How could someone like Sonia still believe in him? Still stand by him? As he walked, he suddenly found himself in front of Porfiry Petrovitch's office. He hesitated. Should he go in? Should he confess now? But his body turned away. Not yet. Later that day, Raskolnikov returned home and found his friend Razumikin waiting. Where have you been? Razumikin asked. You look terrible. Raskolnikov gave no answer. He only sat down and stared at the floor. Razumikin tried to talk, but Raskolnikov was far away, lost in thoughts too heavy to carry. Then, suddenly, Porfiry arrived. He entered the room as if he had been invited. Calm. Confident. Ah, gentlemen, Porfiry said with a smile. I hope I'm not disturbing anything. He sat down and crossed his legs. Actually, I came to talk to Mr. Raskolnikov. Just a friendly visit. Raskolnikov stayed quiet. His heart began to race. Porfiry leaned in and spoke slowly. You're a clever man. But clever men often carry too much. Inside. Raskolnikov looked up. Their eyes met. The room felt tense. Everything was silent, except for the sound of truth, inching closer. Porfiry sat calmly in the chair. His hands were folded. His eyes never left Raskolnikov. Let me speak openly, Porfiry said. I know you committed the murder. Raskolnikov didn't answer. He went pale. His fingers dug into the chair. Porfiry continued, I have no final proof yet. No witness. No weapon. But I have studied you. Watched you. And I understand. Raskolnikov tried to smile. Then arrest me, he said coldly. Porfiry shook his head. No, not yet. I want you to come to the truth yourself. I want you to confess, freely. There was silence. The air was thick with tension. Razumikin looked from one man to the other, confused and afraid. Why do you care if I confess? Raskolnikov asked, voice shaking. Isn't the law enough? Porfiry answered softly, because a confession can save your soul. You're not a monster. You're a man. But a man must carry his truth. Raskolnikov stood up suddenly. You have no idea who I am, he shouted. I'm above your rules. I killed for a reason. Porfiry stayed seated. His voice was calm. Then why do you suffer? Those words hit Raskolnikov like a blow. He froze. His eyes burned with tears, but he didn't speak. Porfiry stood now. You will confess. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But soon. Because you must. Then he walked to the door. Think, Raskolnikov. Think hard. I'll be waiting. And with that, he left. The door closed. Raskolnikov stood in the silence, broken, but still not free. Raskolnikov wandered the streets. His head was full of noise, voices, guilt, questions. He felt like he was losing control. The city around him looked strange, unreal. I have to get out, he whispered to himself. Away from everything. From everyone. But no matter how far he walked, his thoughts followed him. There was no escape from the truth. He ended up at Sonia's door again. He didn't even realize he had come until he saw her face. Sonia let him in without a word. She saw the pain in his eyes. They sat together, quiet. Sonia read him a passage from the Bible, about Lazarus rising from the dead. Raskolnikov listened. The words were soft but powerful. They seemed to touch a part of him he had tried to bury. After a long silence, he whispered, "Why do you care for me? I am not worthy." Sonia took his hand. "Because you suffer. Because you still have a soul." Tears welled up in his eyes. He had tried to be strong, cold, above the world. But here, in this small room, he felt human again. He didn't speak again. But Sonia understood. She stayed beside him, holding his hand in the silence. The next morning, Sonia woke early. She found Raskolnikov sitting in the same place, still awake. He had not spoken during the night, but his face had changed. It looked calmer, not at peace but clearer. "You should go home," Sonia whispered. "You need rest." He nodded slowly and stood up. But before leaving, he turned to her. "I may do something. Soon." Sonia didn't ask. She only held his hand for a moment and said, "Whatever it is, I'll be here." Raskolnikov left and walked the streets again. But this time, he wasn't hiding. He was thinking. He passed the police station twice. His legs felt heavy. His heart was louder than ever. At home, he found Dunya and Razumikin. They were worried. He looked tired, but strangely calm. "I've decided something," Raskolnikov said. "But I can't tell you yet." Dunya tried to speak, but Razumikin stopped her. He understood. Something inside Raskolnikov was changing. That evening, Raskolnikov returned to Sonia. He had made up his mind. The room was silent as he spoke. "I will go," he said. "To the police. To confess." Sonia's eyes filled with tears. She held his hands tightly. "It will be hard," she whispered. "But it's the only way." Raskolnikov nodded. "I know. I'm not doing it for forgiveness. I just can't carry it anymore." The room was quiet again. But now, there was something new in the silence, a small, growing light. The next day, Raskolnikov walked toward the police station. The streets seemed louder. Every sound hit his ears like a bell. He moved slowly, as if every step weighed 100 pounds. But he didn't stop. Sonia followed behind him, at a distance. She didn't say a word. She simply walked, her eyes full of quiet strength. At one point, Raskolnikov turned back and looked at her. She gave him a tiny nod. That was enough. When they reached the police station, he paused. His hands were shaking. His heart pounded. But he stepped inside. Inside, the light was harsh and cold. The officers looked up, confused. Then one of them recognized him. "Raskolnikov?" he asked. "What are you doing here?" Raskolnikov opened his mouth, but for a moment, no sound came out. He swallowed. Then quietly he said, "I have something to confess." A long silence followed. The officer stared at him, then stood. "Come with me," he said. As they walked down the hall, Sonia stood outside waiting. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She just waited. In that moment, she knew, her waiting was only beginning. But she would wait, no matter how long. Part 6. Several days had passed. Raskolnikov had confessed to the murders. He was now in a prison cell, waiting for trial. His cell was small and bare. There was a bed, a chair, and a small window high on the wall. He spent most of the time alone. Sometimes he sat still for hours. Other times, he walked in circles. His thoughts were dark, but less chaotic than before. He thought of his mother, of Dunya, of Sonia. He wondered what they were feeling, whether they hated him or forgave him. He didn't miss his freedom. What he missed was silence inside his heart. Peace. And he didn't know if he'd ever have that again. One morning, the guard opened the cell door. "You have a visitor," he said. Raskolnikov stood, unsure. Then he saw her, Sonia. She had come. She looked tired, but her eyes were warm. She didn't speak at first. She just smiled. That was enough. They sat together, silent at first. Then Sonia reached into her coat and pulled out a small book, the Bible. She opened to a page and read to him softly. It was the story of forgiveness. And Raskolnikov listened. For the first time, something inside him began to loosen, just a little. Not redemption, but the beginning of it. Weeks passed. The city waited for the trial of Rodion Raskolnikov, the young man who had shocked everyone with his quiet confession. Newspapers wrote articles about him. Some called him mad. Others called him evil. A few called him brave. But Raskolnikov stayed quiet. He refused to explain his reasons. He said only, "I am guilty. That is enough." At the trial, people gathered in the courtroom. His mother and sister sat in the back. Sonia was there too. The judge asked questions. Raskolnikov answered honestly but simply. He showed no emotion. The court heard from witnesses, the pawnbroker's neighbors, police, even Dr. Zosimov. Everyone gave their version of what happened. In the end, the judge spoke for a long time. Then he gave the sentence, 8 years of hard labor in Siberia. Gasps filled the room. Some had expected death. Others, more time. But Raskolnikov simply nodded. Sonia reached out and held his hand. Her eyes were wet, but calm. He looked at her and whispered, "Thank you." His mother fainted quietly. Dunya helped her. Razumikin promised to take care of them both. As the guards led Raskolnikov away, he turned once to look at Sonia. She was smiling through tears. And in that moment he felt, for the first time, that perhaps this was not the end but a beginning. After the trial, Raskolnikov was taken away under guard. The long journey to Siberia had begun. The prison train moved slowly through Russia's cold and endless landscape. Villages passed by like shadows. Raskolnikov sat quietly in the corner of the prison wagon. He said little. He ate little. He slept little. The guards left him alone. The other prisoners watched him with suspicion at first, but then ignored him. He thought often of Sonia. She had promised to come after him, to live nearby in Siberia. That gave him a strange kind of hope. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could see her face. Soft, patient, and full of love. One evening, the train stopped for the night. The prisoners were taken off and held in a wooden barracks. The sky was filled with stars. Raskolnikov looked up through the cracks in the wall and thought about freedom. Not physical freedom, but something deeper. He didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, he didn't feel completely lost. The cold wind outside made the walls creak, but inside in his mind there was silence, not empty but peaceful. In Siberia, time passed slowly. Days were hard, cold, and filled with labor. Raskolnikov worked quietly, never complaining. The other prisoners avoided him. They called him proud and strange. He didn't care. He stayed distant. But Sonia kept her promise. She came to Siberia. She found a place nearby and visited him every week. She brought food, clean clothes, and a smile. She never judged him. She only loved him, silently, patiently. At first, Raskolnikov could barely speak to her. Shame lived in his chest like a stone. But little by little, something inside him began to change. He began to see Sonia not just as a comfort, but as hope. One day, during a walk in the prison yard, he saw Sonia standing near the fence. He looked at her. Really looked. Her eyes met his. No words were said. But something passed between them, a beginning. When he returned to his cell that night, he lay on his bed and cried quietly. Not from sadness, but from release. And for the first time, truly, he wanted to live. Not just survive, but live, as a human, with love. Spring arrived in Siberia. The snow melted slowly, and the cold air became softer. Life in the prison camp continued. Raskolnikov's health was poor. He had been sick with fever for weeks. Sonia visited every day, bringing food and sitting beside him. One morning, he opened his eyes and saw her sleeping in the chair. Her head rested on the wall, her hands folded. A strange warmth filled his heart. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. He whispered, "Sonia." She woke up and looked at him. He took her hand. It was the first time he touched her with love. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Everything was understood in silence. That night, Raskolnikov lay in bed and thought. He was beginning to feel something new. Pain, yes, but also the beginning of peace. He still didn't fully understand love. He didn't fully believe in redemption. But now he wanted to try. And Sonia, quiet, steady Sonia, would walk that road with him, step by step, day by day. The days passed slowly in the prison camp. Raskolnikov returned to work, though he was still weak. He didn't speak much to others. But Sonia came often, bringing him quiet strength. The other prisoners noticed the change. Raskolnikov was no longer cold or proud. He listened. He watched. He thought. Sometimes at night, he would sit alone and remember his past. The murders. The fear. The lies. The dreams of greatness. Now, those dreams felt empty. Wrong. He no longer believed he was above others. One evening, Sonia gave him a small book, the New Testament. He looked at it silently. Then he took it. He didn't read it right away, but he kept it near. It stayed under his pillow at night. He wasn't ready for faith. Not yet. But something inside him had opened. That spring, Raskolnikov stepped outside one morning and saw the grass begin to grow. The river was no longer frozen. He looked at Sonia, who was waiting nearby. And in that quiet moment, he felt something new, soft, painful but true. It was the beginning of love. The beginning of life. Raskolnikov began to change, but the process was slow and painful. His pride still fought inside him. He often felt torn between two selves, the old Raskolnikov who believed in ideas, and the new one who began to feel love. He didn't talk much to Sonia, but her presence meant everything. She brought peace simply by being there. He read the New Testament she gave him, little by little. The words didn't change him immediately, but they stayed in his heart. One night, he had a dream. In it, he saw a world where everyone believed they were absolutely right, and hated each other for it. Everyone was sick with pride and rage. There was no love, no forgiveness. Only violence and madness. He woke up sweating. That world was the one he had believed in. And he was afraid of it now. The next day, he went outside and saw Sonia. She smiled at him. He looked at her differently, with tenderness. They sat together on a bench. For a long time, they said nothing. But his hand touched hers. This time, she didn't pull away. It was not the end of pain. But it was the beginning of something real. A seed of life had been planted.